All right, we've got just another section to go here, and this section is going to be about the need for protection. So we kind of already have hit on this, obviously, just through our own common sense discussions and sharing of information, but we'll run through the video here and hit these talking points and make sure there's nothing that we missed if that works for you guys. Before we get going, do you guys have any questions maybe you thought of over the break or anything? Any other points to bring up, comments? Nope? All right.
Okay, so there are many different ways you can use personal protective equipment to keep safe at work. But you should always use protective equipment that is the most effective, comfortable, and easy to use. You should also be trained in the equipment to make sure you're using it properly.
The American National Standards Institute provides the required specifications on a variety of personal protective equipment for the workplace. Your employer will meet these requirements when choosing protective equipment for you to use. Your eyes are extremely sensitive to injury, and you should take their protection very seriously. Eye protection devices include safety glasses or goggles, face shields, and shaded filter lenses for hazards from bright lights, such as those that can occur when welding. If you need prescription lenses to see properly, those lenses need to be integrated with your personal protective equipment. Regular eyewear does not typically provide adequate protection from many hazards. The most common type of hearing protection is a single-use earplug made of waxed cotton, foam, silicone rubber, or fiberglass wool. These earplugs are self-forming and, when properly inserted, work well. Compress the earplug. Insert into the ear pointed forward, and release the compression to allow it to fill the ear canal. Pre-formed or molded earplugs consistently work better, but must be individually fitted by a professional. They can be disposable or reusable. Earmuffs require a perfect seal around the ear to be effective. Glasses, facial hair, long hair, or facial movements such as chewing can reduce the protective value of earmuffs. There are many potential airborne hazards in the workplace, and several different types of respirators are available for protection. Choosing the right respirator depends on the hazard. If you're working in a dusty environment, you'll need a filtering face piece to trap the particulates and prevent your inhalation of them. If there are contaminants in the air, you'll need an air purifying respirator with the correct purifying cartridges, which will absorb the specific chemicals that are present. When high concentrations of chemicals are in the air, or the air is unsafe to breathe, you'll need an air-supplied respirator. There are various types of this kind of respirator, but the most common is the one used by firefighters. It's called a self-contained breathing apparatus, or SCBA. Users breathe directly from the air in the tank and not from the air in the surrounding environment. Regardless of the types of respirators used, they must all be approved for use by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. Whenever there is a risk of head injury on a worksite, employees need appropriate head protection. A hard hat will protect your head from impact or penetration with its hard outer shell and a shock absorber system. When there is a risk of electrical shock, hard hats designed for electrical insulation are available for use. Desired features of personal protective footwear include steel toes, metatarsal protection, puncture or slip resistant soles, and chemical resistance. They can also be waterproof and insulated to provide protection in cold weather. The situation and the work environment will dictate the types of hand protection you need to keep safe. Chemical resistant gloves can help prevent chemicals from being absorbed through the skin. Kevlar or metal mesh gloves are cut resistant gloves and can protect your hands when you're working with knives or other sharp objects. Extreme temperature gloves help protect your fingers from the cold and frostbite. Electrical work gloves help prevent electric shock and related burns. In general, work clothes need to include long sleeve shirts and long pants when working in areas with hazards to open skin. When appropriate, work clothes should be flame retardant or chemical resistant. Avoid loose clothing that could get snagged by moving equipment and cause an injury.
For most of us, it's not necessary to look like a knight preparing for battle every time we go to work, but it is necessary to meet the demands of the job. Just as a knight wore a helmet, visor, and gauntlets to keep himself safe, we can wear a hard hat, eye goggles, and gloves to keep ourselves safe at work.
All right, do you guys have any questions about that video? Once again, just more common sense stuff, obviously, right? We'll just run down through and look at a couple of the different hazards in the PPE for what each of those different hazards are. Your eyes are probably one of the most sensitive areas on your body to injury, believe it or not. And a lot of people don't realize that, but eye injuries are prevalent in a number of industries. And the thing about eye injuries is that it doesn't take much at all to cause an eye injury. It could be, for example, a metal shaving, extremely small, so small that you might barely be able to even see it with the bare eye, that could cause some really long-term or even permanent damage to your eyesight. Or any other particles of anything from grinding maybe, or just a particle of something breaking off and getting to the eye can really cause a lot of long-term damage. Eye protection includes safety glasses or goggles. There are some, and then also face shields and shaded filter lenses for hazard, from bright lights, such as welding, for example, would be a good example of when you would use one of those filter plates. But the thing to remember about the safety glasses is to ensure that once again they have the ANSI stamp on them. A lot of folks you'll see wearing sunglasses in the workplace. That's fine if they meet the ANSI requirement and they're shatterproof and they're certified for that work environment. So that's a big issue I know in our world, is ensuring that if folks are wearing sunglasses that they're actually safety sunglasses and meet the requirements. What about you guys? What do you guys do for eye protection on your work sites?
Well, we provide dark lens and clear lens glasses that we purchased them at Maxwell, so they do a real good job in making sure everything is up to what we're doing. So that's pretty much it.
And do you have any trouble getting folks to wear them, or?
Yes, that's been an issue. Yeah, there's people that just don't like them, at all, and we just have to make sure they have them on.
Yep.
Especially, it's easy for you to forget that you don't have them on. It's hard to believe when they're cutting something or they forget to put them on, and you got to make sure you remind them.
Yeah.
Put them on, 'cause like you said, it's real. Your eyes are real sensitive. So
Yep.
we try to stress that.
Absolutely. Another big challenge is whenever people have prescription lenses, trying to integrate someone who has a prescription lens need into providing the correct PPE. It can often be a challenge, and there are some different options to look at there, but you just need to be aware that typically their regular eyewear does not constitute PPE. So there may be some special accommodations that need to be looked at to ensure that they're able to see, obviously, but while still meeting the PPE requirements of the job. All right, so hearing protection is the next thing we're going to discuss. Your ears are also, highly sensitive, not so much so as your eyes necessarily in terms of being susceptible to damage, but the potential is there for noise damage. The thing that's unique about hearing damage is that at the time that it's occurring, people often don't know it. And it's, once again, kind of like the respiratory issues we were discussing earlier. People may not realize it for many years to come that, oh, hey, I worked around that heavy equipment for those years and didn't wear my ear protection like I should have. And 10 or 20 years down the road, they find out that they have significant hearing loss in one ear or both ears, or a certain range of hearing loss. So that's a very common issue. And people, often do not want to wear their hearing protection because there's often no immediate repercussions, and they don't understand the long-term damage that's being done to their hearing. There's numerous different types of those. Probably the most common by far is just the those that can be purchased in bulk, and they're just foam, and they are form-fitting to anyone's ear. Those seem to be the most common across many industries. They don't provide the highest level of protection in terms of the number of decibels, that are kept from damaging the ear, but the good thing about them is that they are cheap, they're disposable, they're easy to use, and they do definitely provide an adequate level of protection, even though it may not be as high as something like a fitted earpiece or an ear muff. What else? The thing about earmuffs are good. They're often not feasible for the work environments, though, especially people that work out of doors or maybe would have a need to have hearing protection for an entire, maybe an entire length of a workday, for example. That's another reason the more disposable types of hearing protection come in a lot handier. For example, like you were asking about the heat a while ago, it's not very reasonable to think that someone working out on the side of the road would be able to wear, form-fitting earmuffs on their head for, an 8 or 10 hour workday, when it's 100 degrees outside. So that's where the earplugs would come in a lot handier and more realistic, I guess. Workplace noise can vary. The hearing protection you choose must reduce noise to an acceptable level. Not only can the workplace noise vary in terms of what you're exposed to, the worker, but it can also vary in terms of the length, the duration. So that's why you often see hearing protection that is made to be easily accessible. I'll give you an example. There are often disposable foam earplugs that are on a cord that the employee can put around their neck. There are disposable foam earplugs that come on plastic bands that they can leave around their neck, so that they may not have exposure throughout the entire work shift to that high level of noise pollution, but during those times they can easily put their earplugs in and then pull them out and have them readily accessible again. There are a lot of different airborne hazards. We've kind of already hit on this. There's really two levels of protection there. There's just the simple dust filter masks, which are definitely better than nothing at keeping some of the particulate matter out of one's lungs, and those are common on many work sites throughout a lot of industries. The other is a respirator. A respirator is far and away the better choice. However, it may be unreasonable to go ahead and go that route if, depending on what the circumstances are, because the respirator would require a higher level of training, would require a fit test, all that sort of thing. I mean, it's a pretty intensive process to get someone set up for a respirator. That being said, though, there may be instances where a respirator is required, through OSHA requirements or other regulatory requirements. For that job site and that type of work, a respirator is a considered required piece of PPE. Does anyone have any experience working with the respirators at all? All right. In a dusty environment like we would find in a construction environment, most construction environments, the disposable dust filter masks, like I mentioned, are most prevalent and do a good job. All they do is literally filter out the particulate matter, so keep the small dust particles from getting down in one's lungs. So they can be really helpful. The other types of respirators that they have are the air purifying respirators. I'll give you an example of when those might be utilized. Say someone is working in a confined space and they have an exposure to a certain gaseous chemical, for example. They may need a respirator that actually helps them to purify that. Those are obviously pretty high-tech gadgets requiring, like I said, a higher level of training, a fit test, that sort of thing. And then when there's a risk of head injury, obviously there's a need for head protection, and that's typically in the form of a hard hat. Do you guys have an industry standard for those for what you do? No?
Not that I'm aware of.
And
I
you
have a
get,
quick question, if you're
you
aware.
bet.
I'd asked around,
Uh-huh.
actually seen this. Is there a regulation on what kind of color you wear? Because I've seen people with black hard hats, and I was informed that, that's not safe having, a black hard hat. Is that true? Do you know anything about that?
I don't know if someone knows they can speak to that. I can tell you this, that's common in our industry too. There are a lot of black helmets, and I actually read a safety report on it just last year that they showed there were a much higher incidence of heat stroke and heat stress and heat exhaustion for those crews, fire crews that were wearing black helmets. So I don't necessarily know if there's a requirement on the color, but I know that there's been research that's proven that having a dark colored hard hat can contribute to heat stress.
I don't think we have any regulation on that. What companies, some of the companies do, they give the foreman a black hat or a red hat while everybody else is wearing yellow, just so there are other crews out there can figure out who has authority out there.
Aren't there different hard hats though that have,
Just different strengths and
Strengths,
materials,
yes.
yeah. You can go from plastic hats all the way to metal hats, depending on what you're doing. And then, they come in different shapes too, they got the cowboy hat out there that some of them wear nowadays, and the old safari hat that you see every once in a while, and the normal hard hat.
Absolutely. The thing about the hard hats typically is they're as lightweight as technology will allow while still affording a certain level of crush or fall protection. And the reason for that is so they can be worn comfortably throughout a shift. I mean, ideally, with the old metal hard hats, for example, if a worker were to wear those, and those have been nearly phased out in a lot of industries, or completely phased out in most industries, for numerous reasons. One, with the technology we have now in plastics, we can get a higher level of crush protection anyway from a plastic, but also they're cooler and they can wear longer. So that's really the thing to remember with hard hats is just like any other piece of PPE. If it's not comfortable to the worker, they're going to find a way to get out of wearing the required PPE. So if it's lightweight and it's not even noticeable, and while they're wearing it, they don't even feel the inconvenience of it while it is protecting them, then that's perfect. So you guys do provide those though for your employees as well. What else? There's, obviously in some workplaces there's a risk of electrical shock. Not so much in the industry that we're talking about here, but in others there are requirements in terms of rubber-soled footwear, for example, or leather gloves are required to protect from electrical shock. And there are numerous different types of PPE, for people's feet. And often when people think of PPE, they don't really consider the footwear part of the PPE, but really it is. What is common across multiple industries is that steel-toed versus non-steel-toed is always an issue depending on the industry. And what we mean by that, is everyone familiar with that? The steel-toe boots, literally have a steel insert in them to protect from a crush or fall, that sort of thing, to a worker's toes. The non-steel-toed obviously don't. They're just a normal, typically a regular leather work boot. They also, there's numerous different requirements for slip-resistant soles and tread patterns and tread types that may be required by certain industries. And then also, some industries require a certain chemical resistance. If there's a chemical that the worker is commonly exposed to that would erode the sole of their shoe, which happens, then maybe it has to be resistant to a certain chemical. Do you guys have any kind of a standard? I would assume that's not a PPE item you guys provide, right? Your employees probably provide that themselves.
Yeah, it's the only requirements sometimes when we work near the railroad, they require us to either provide them steel-toe boots or have them get them done.
I gotcha.
It's been,
And then that's something where if the employee has to provide that, then I guess you would inspect probably and make sure that they meet the standard.
right.
Well, anytime you do the railroad jobs, it's a whole different animal. You have to pay railroad insurance. They either provide a flagger or you have to provide a flagger. And they really charge a lot of money for all that. They check all that stuff. Steel-toed, steel-shanked. Everybody needs to be wearing the hard hat. No one can wear color red out there. So you have
Why is that?
That's official for stop.
I see.
So if you have a lineman out there and he, wearing a red shirt or whatever, that's, the signal to stop. Same thing with the employee. If they see something red out there, they're gonna shut down their production of whatever they're
I
doing.
see.
And get somebody out there from rail to figure out what's going on. So, there's a lot of things that they have to deal with other than just, okay, yeah, we're gonna wear boots or whatever that day. So we, they do look at that. They're, I guess, the employer would look at that too.
That's super interesting. And obviously, I would assume that the reason is, I mean, that work near railroads would fall under an entirely different regulatory agency within the federal government. So that is really interesting, though, to see how the standards vary between the different types of work depending on what agency is regulating it.
Anytime we have a railroad project or a job by the railroad, we have a special provision put into the set of plans, and it tells you everything that you need to have.
I see.
And sometimes it does have safety equipment on there.
Wow, that's super interesting. All right, so obviously, as we've mentioned here previously, the work situation and the work environment will typically dictate the types of protection that's utilized, and that's no different for hand protection. I know, Victoria, you were asking earlier, there might be different. There are many different types of hand protection, and there might be different types of hand protection that's needed at different times by an individual worker on a work site. For example, and a worker just doing their normal day-to-day job might need a leather glove to protect their hand, but when they go to mix a chemical, they might need to take those leather gloves off to avoid them, keep them from getting contaminated. Put on, latex gloves, basically medical type gloves that will provide a substantial barrier to the chemical itself to actually get into their skin, and then dispose of those when they're done with that task, and then go back to their normal leather gloves. Does that sound about right for what you guys deal with? And that's common for a lot of industries, I think, because for a couple reasons. One, obviously, you don't want to allow the chemicals to seep through their leather gloves into the skin. And then two, once those chemicals are in those leather gloves, if they're continuing to wear them throughout the day or even day to day, it's just prolonging the exposure, keeping that chemical adjacent to their skin. Kevlar or metal mesh gloves are cut-resistant gloves and protect the hands when folks are cutting with sharp objects, as you guys saw in the video. And then extreme temperatures obviously require different types of gloves to prevent against cold weather injuries, hypothermia, and that sort of thing. And then electrical work gloves, once again, for electrical shock hazards, which often those are just leather gloves that have a certain standard involved with them, but it's nothing too specific typically. In general, work clothes need to be long sleeve, long pants when working in areas where you have hazards to open skin, and then when appropriate, the work clothes need to be flame retardant or flame resistant. FR is the common term that's used lately in industry the last few years for that, and it's becoming more common across a lot of industries that FR garments are required of workers as a standard part of their daily uniform. Obviously, avoiding loose clothing and anything that's going to cause a hazard in terms of getting snagged is important, and that's common across many different tasks on a job site. Heavy equipment is one that comes to mind right away. I mean, that's not something when either operating or working around heavy equipment you don't want to have obviously free hanging and loose clothes or loose hair, anything that could get caught and cause an injury. Can you guys think of any other situations maybe where loose fitting clothing could cause a potential issue? That's probably the number one.
I know about
Equipment
ties
operation.
getting caught in machines.
Well, it's possible. There's not a whole lot of ties, I'm guessing, out on the job site on the side of the road, but it's the same concept though. I mean, anything, long hair, unsecured hair has been known to cause injuries to get caught in equipment. I mean, anything that's free hanging and is not secured can cause problems. All right, do you guys have any questions?
Do they manufacture, like I know kids' pajamas have fire retardant in them, but do they manufacture work clothes with fire retardant?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. And they'll have an FR label on them for fire resistant. It's real common in the energy industry, in the oil field, oil and natural gas. But it's becoming, as technology's improved. It used to be years ago the only people who wore FR quality documents were really firefighters and linemen. But as regulations have increased and also the technology's improved, making it more affordable, the last 5 years we've seen a complete proliferation of fire-resistant garments for numerous different industries. You know, every industry you can imagine where they could ever come into contact with any type of shock or fire hazard. So, yeah, there are entire companies actually that are popping up that in the past, you know, maybe you had to go to a real specialty company to find those types of garments that provide stuff to the fire service or to, you know, linemen to that sector of the energy industry. And now it's really common to find FR garments across any industry. There are lots of, you know, distributors and dealers popping up. So, does that sound right? It looks like you might know something more about that. Yeah.
Carhartt,
Yeah.
Nike, they're out there.
Yep.
Most
Absolutely.
of our guys out there are just wearing jeans.
Yep. And you know, denim, you'd be amazed at how fire resistant denim really is. I mean, there's a reason that in the 40s and 50s, that's what firefighters wore before they had better PPE. I mean, it's not perfect, but it definitely does have some fire retarding capability.
Even uniform companies today will treat the clothing for certain industries.
Yep.
I have a son-in-law that's a welder. They treat his uniforms that the company provides.
Yep.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Do they have things that work the opposite way to cool you off or keep you cool in, like, I don't know, cold packs and jackets or something?
I don't know about that so much, but the beauty of the fire-resistant technology that we have now is that you can apply those chemicals to any garment, and so a lot of them are very breathable, and you might not even otherwise know they were fire-resistant unless you look at the tag and see, you know, the industry standard, just the little red FR logo on there. So technology is amazing. It's really improved a lot the last couple of years in terms of fire-resistant garments.
I think OSHA standards has pushed that along.
Probably has. I'm sure it has. And we often see that. I mean, regulatory agencies dictate the innovation in private industry. It's just the nature of the beast when it comes to that kind of stuff. All right. Any other questions? All right. Would you guys like another quick, maybe 10-minute break to get some more coffee, take a restroom break? And we're about 2/3 of the way done here, so we're plugging right along. When we come back, we'll go over one more video segment. We've got one more unit to go over, and then we'll do some review. And I think Victoria has some forms for you guys to complete, but other than that, I think we'll be ready to probably wrap up here in the next hour or so, as long as everyone's okay with that. Good to go? Okay, thank you.